The blizzard had descended upon the small town like an angry spirit, swallowing streetlights whole and burying cars beneath blankets of white. Power lines snapped under the weight of ice, leaving the entire neighborhood plunged into darkness. But at the end of Willow Lane, a modest house glowed amber against the storm-darkened night. Inside, Evelyn Carter, a 74-year-old widow, moved slowly around her small kitchen, her weathered hands feeding another log into the old wood-burning stove that had been her salvation through 7 lonely winters. Her silver hair was pinned back, in the same neat bun she had worn since her teaching days. Life had felt impossibly quiet without Robert, her late husband, whose warm laughter once filled every corner of this house. The silence deepened after her son, Derek, abandoned family dinners for a reckless lifestyle, showing up only when money ran short. His wife, Sabrina, would stand behind him, sneering at Evelyn's backwoods life, her sharp eyes measuring the value of every piece of furniture. On the mantel stood Robert's wedding day photograph, his arm around her waist, his smile proud. Beside it sat a tiny carved wooden box, holding the last treasure she cherished, a pair of pale yellow knitted booties, wrapped carefully in tissue. The only reminder of the grandchild she had held for 3 days before fever took him away. Then came the pounding on her front door, sharp and desperate. It was followed by the unmistakable wail of a baby. Evelyn hurried to the window, brushing aside frost with her sleeve. 2 shadowed figures stood in the swirling snow. A towering man in a leather jacket, broad shoulders braced against the storm, and a thin young woman whose soaked coat clung to her trembling body. "Please, ma'am." The man's deep, gravelly voice cracked with desperation. "My baby can't take much more of this cold. Please, we just need somewhere warm." The woman clutched a tiny bundle to her chest. Her voice shook with exhaustion. "We knocked on 4 houses already." One man saw his jacket and slammed the door. "Please, I'm begging you. My daughter's only 6 weeks old, and she's so cold I can barely feel her breathing." Evelyn's hand froze over the deadbolt. Every warning about strangers in the night echoed in her mind. The patches on the man's jacket glinted unmistakably, belonging to the Hell's Angels dot, but then the baby's cry pierced the night again. Weaker than before, Evelyn's heart clenched. Her maternal instinct, buried since the loss of her grandson, roared back to life. The lock turned with a sharp click. She opened the door wide, warmth spilling into the storm. "Get inside, all of you. No child should be out in weather like this." The man stepped in first, snow melting from his boots. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm Luke Donovan. This is my wife, Clara, and our daughter, Rose." He carefully unwrapped the bundle and placed the tiny baby in Evelyn's arms. The infant's skin was icy, her cries faint, but Evelyn held her close, rocking instinctively as warmth seeped back into the fragile body. "Sweet little angel," she whispered. "You're safe now." Clara crouched near the stove, shivering violently, while Evelyn prepared warm milk from the emergency formula she always kept. As the baby fed and settled, Evelyn said softly, "People are too quick to judge by appearances. They see leather and tattoos and think they know a person's soul. But they miss the love in the father's eyes when he's protecting his child." Luke's dark eyes softened, glancing down at Rose. Clara, sipping tea with trembling hands, whispered, "Most people see Luke's jacket and assume trouble. They don't see that he works 16-hour days at the garage just to give us a life." Evelyn smiled faintly as Rose drifted into a peaceful sleep. Watching her chest rise and fall, Evelyn felt something shift deep inside her, like a locked door slowly creaking open. By dawn, the storm had broken. The snow lay deep and glittering across Willow Lane, knee-high on the steps of Evelyn's porch. Pale sunlight pressed weakly through the frost on the window, casting a golden stripe across the worn wooden floor. Luke stirred from the chair where he had kept watch through the night. Clara, curled on the couch, held Rose close to her chest. The baby now wrapped snug in Evelyn's wool scarf. When it was time to leave, Luke paused at the edge of the yard, his breath rising in clouds against the cold morning air. He turned back, walking firmly to Evelyn and clasped her weathered hand. Most of this town turned us away, he said quietly, voice edged with disbelief and gratitude. But you opened your door. Writers don't forget that. I'll come back for you. That's a promise. Clara stepped forward and drew out a small woven bracelet from her coat pocket. I made this for Rose, she said softly. But I want you to have it. Evelyn slipped it over her wrist, the bright threads vivid against her dark skin. She stood at the door, watching them disappear down the street until the white swallowed them whole. A week later, the familiar rumble of motorcycles rolled onto Willow Lane. Evelyn's heart leapt at the sound. Luke Donovan walked up her path, no longer the desperate father of that stormy night, but a man walking tall, his leather jacket replaced with a clean button-down shirt. Clara followed with Rose, her cheeks plump and rosy now, her tiny eyes sparkling with life. Mrs. Carter, Luke called as he reached her steps. We came to see you properly, to explain why what you did meant so much to us. Evelyn welcomed them inside, as Clara settled Rose into the old high chair that had been gathering dust since Derek's boyhood. Luke withdrew a white envelope from his pocket. The Hells Angels aren't what most people think, he explained. At least not our chapter. We're not criminals. We're brothers, mechanics, carpenters, teachers. We ride because we love the road and because we believe in loyalty and family. Clara nodded, bouncing Rose on her knee. Luke works at Morrison's garage. I teach piano to neighborhood kids. People see the jackets, but they don't see the heart. Evelyn opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was more money than she had seen since Robert's life insurance payout 7 years ago. A note explained it was collected during a charity. Ride, every rider giving what they could. This is too much, she whispered, tears rising. I didn't help you for reward. I did it because it was right. Luke shook his head firmly. This isn't payment. This is honor. Our family doesn't forget what you did for Rose. And now every rider in our chapter considers her their niece, Clara added with a gentle smile. Besides the money, we'd like to help around your house. Fix the roof, repair the porch, whatever you need. Our brothers are already outside with tools. From the window, Evelyn saw bikes lined up along the street, riders unloading toolboxes and equipment. Her heart swelled as she turned back, and Rose, giggling, crawled toward her, tugging at her skirt. Evelyn lifted the baby into her arms, whispering through tears, My goodness, sweetheart. Look how strong you've gotten in just 1 week. But not everyone in town saw Evelyn's kindness with open eyes. Neighbors gossiped, whispering about the parade of motorcycles at her house. Some claimed she was cozying up with dangerous men. Others muttered about money changing hands. The rumor traveled, eventually reaching a cramped apartment on the other side of the county, to Derek and his sharp-tongued wife. Sabrina leaned against the counter, smirking. Your mother's been keeping cozy with a bunch of bikers. They fixed up her roof, gave her money too. Bet she's hiding it somewhere in that old house. Derek slouched at the table, half-emptied bottle in front of him. At her words, his dull eyes sparked with anger. He poured another drink, downed it, and slammed the glass down. That's my house, he growled. Everything in it's mine. Later that night, in the smoke-filled haze of a low-ceiling bar, Sabrina leaned close, her nails tapping the table. Funny, isn't it? She murmured. Those bikers play hero, and her own son gets nothing. Nothing. Derek slammed his palm against the table, rattling the glasses. That house is mine, and I'll take what's owed. By midnight, the two of them stood outside Evelyn's house. The patched-up roof gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Sabrina sneered. This is it. This is what you're proud of? Inside, Derek rifled through drawers, clumsy from drink. His hand hovered over a framed wedding photo of Robert and Evelyn, smiling on their wedding day. For a moment, something flickered in his face. But Sabrina snatched it, tore it in half. With a sharp rip, Don't go soft, she said coldly. You need money, not memories. The sound brought Evelyn into the room, her nightgown glowing in the firelight. She knelt, gathering the torn pieces in her hands as though they were something living. "That was your father and me," she whispered. "All I have left of him." She rose, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "I gave most of what they gave me to the orphanage. To children with no one. I kept only a little. Derek's laugh was bitter. The orphanage. You still dream you can save the world." Her eyes softened. "I only want you to live well, Derek. Like the boy who used to run home to tell me every little thing." But he shook his head, hardened. "This place is mine, one way or another." Sabrina's hand slipped into his arm, her smirk returning. They left, the door hanging ajar behind them. The cabinet splintered like a wound. Evelyn sank into her chair, the torn photo clutched to her chest. Her tears fell silently into the firelight. That evening, Evelyn shared a simple supper with Luke, Clara, and baby Rose. The stew bubbled in her old cast-iron pot, filling the kitchen with savory warmth. The fire crackled in the stove, its glow softening the room. They spoke of little things. The weather, Clara's piano students, the stubborn rooster on a nearby farm. Rose gurgled happily in her mother's lap. At one point, Luke set down his spoon, reached across the table, and took Evelyn's hand. His voice was quiet but carried weight. "When the whole town shut us out, you opened your door. You didn't ask who we were. You just let us in. I can't be your son, not like Derek is, but if it's all right with you, I'd like to." "Call you Mom?" Evelyn's eyes stung with tears. She rose from her chair and embraced him. Luke held her tightly, one hand steady on her back. Clara smiled softly and placed Rose into Evelyn's arms. "This is the child you saved that night. One day, she'll call you Grandma." Rose's tiny hand wrapped around Evelyn's finger, her laugh bright and pure. Evelyn felt something heal inside her chest. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. The next morning, Evelyn moved slowly through her kitchen, trying to bring order back to what Derek and Sabrina had left in chaos. She had just set the kettle on the stove when she heard the low, familiar rumble of motorcycles rolling up Willow. Her heart lifted. She peeked through the curtain and saw Luke Donovan dismounting his bike, 3 other riders close behind. Today they weren't in leather, but in flannel shirts and jeans. Each man carrying something, one with a box of pastries, another with firewood, another with tools. Luke grinned slightly as Evelyn opened the door. "We were nearby and figured we owed you another visit." The scent of cinnamon pastries filled the warm kitchen as they set the box on her table. Evelyn was about to pour coffee when a crash echoed from the living room. Luke's expression hardened instantly. He strode into the room with the others at his back. There stood Derek, tossing books onto the floor, while Sabrina knelt by the old cabinet, yanking out drawers. "Look at this," Sabrina sneered. "Your mother here too good for her own son. Let's bikers fix her house, feed her, and who knows what else." Luke stepped forward until he stood between Evelyn and her. "Son," his jaw was tight, but his voice was calm, steady, steel beneath velvet. "This woman saved my family when your town turned us away. You put a hand on her, you go through me first." Derek puffed his chest as if ready to fight, but something in Luke's eyes made him falter. Luke didn't shout, didn't move closer. He just stood solid like an oak in a storm. Then Luke pulled out his phone, made a short call. Minutes later, the street outside thundered with engines. 1, 3, then a dozen. The entire chapter had come. Their headlights cut through the winter sunlight. Flooding the yard in harsh white beams. At the front was Ray Torres, the silver-bearded leader. He removed his gloves, his voice carrying with quiet authority. "Mrs. Carter is our friend," he said, his gaze sweeping over Derek and Sabrina. "She's an honored name in this club. You'd be wise not to test that." From across the street, neighbors peeked through curtains, jaws dropping at the sight. This was not the lawless gang they whispered about, but a brotherhood standing in silent formation for a woman who had once opened her door. Moments later, a police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out, eyes sweeping over. The scene, the bikers outside, the splintered cabinet inside, the torn photograph on the hearth. The younger officer caught the smell of alcohol on Derek's breath. Within minutes, Derek was led to the cruiser, Sabrina trailing behind. With a scowl as she was told she'd need to answer questions, engines idled low outside, a protective wall of sound around Evelyn. As the cruiser pulled away, Luke turned to her, his voice gentle again. "I'm sorry you had to see that." Evelyn's hand closed around his. "You've done more for me than I can say, but..." Her eyes turned to the empty road where her son had disappeared. "I still hope one day Derek comes back to me, the boy he used to be." Luke's thumb brushed her hand softly. "You're his mother. You don't stop hoping." The months that followed carried a rhythm Evelyn had thought long lost. Luke and Clara visited often, sometimes with other writers. They brought groceries, firewood, preserves, or simply laughter. They repaired her porch, mended her roof, swept her walkway clear of ice dot, and slowly, the town began to see them differently. The bikers weren't criminals. They were loyal friends. Word spread unevenly, but it spread. Evelyn's home became a haven. The fire in her stove never went out for long. A traveler caught in bad weather, a young couple with a broken heater, even the postman in deep snow. They all found warmth by her fire. A cup of tea and kindness without conditions. One crisp spring morning, the thunder of engines rolled once more through the town. More than a dozen riders rode in formation, their bikes gleaming in the sunlight. They passed through the main street without hurry, engines steady like a heartbeat. Neighbors stepped from shops and porches, watching silently. Some still whispered, but others lifted hands in greeting. Got at her little house on Willow Lane. Evelyn stood on the porch wrapped in her shawl, the bracelet Clara had given her bright against her wrist. As the riders passed, several lifted a hand in salute. She smiled, her heart steady with their presence. Inside, the stove burned brightly. Rose's laughter lived in her memory. Derek's face, as he once had been, stayed tucked in her heart. And Evelyn knew this truth. The whispers of the town didn't matter. The road might take people away, but as long as her fire burned, her door would stay open, and somewhere in the distance, the low thunder of motorcycles would remind them all. One act of kindness can carry farther than anyone ever expects.